This is Paul Henry on a Thursday morning, and thanks very much to our partners AMP. Pan Am, Ansett, Swiss Air, GB Airways, Continental Air, Hooters Air. Yes, Hooters Air. What do all of those airlines and many others have in common? None of them have survived as long as Air New Zealand, which is today celebrating 75 years since their inaugural flight. Norm Thompson worked for them for 48 of those 75 years and joins me now. Norm, good morning to you.
Good morning, Paul.
It is quite a day, isn't it? Because it's quite an achievement for an airline to reach 75.
Huge celebration for Air New Zealand, but a huge celebration for the country as well.
I mean, that list of airlines that I mentioned there, and there are so many more, huge airlines in major countries, many of them, that just haven't been able to cut the grade.
It hasn't been easy. We've had our ups and downs, but more highs than anything. But more importantly, it's been a fantastic contribution by Air New Zealand to enable New Zealand to have its national carrier and be one of the best in the world.
Now, what we said to you the other day when we were getting you to come on the program is we said choose 5 moments in that 75 years that sort of encapsulate in a way the history of an airline. And you started with the Coral route. That goes back to the 50s.
Yeah, I wasn't there in the 50s, Paul, but certainly the Coral route was a well-established route for Air New Zealand, and it had some many stories around it with the flying boat. One great story...
And this was up into the islands?
Up into the islands, Fiji, Aitutaki and the Cook Islands, and on to Tahiti.
And what happened?
Well, a wonderful story that was told at the 50th celebration, actually, by Captain Joe Shepherd, when one day the flying boat couldn't quite carry on beyond Aitutaki. It had an engineering issue, and so all the passengers, mainly American, had to be offloaded. And there was a bit of a riot. They didn't want to be offloaded in quite a remote island in the Pacific Island, but they had to do it. So Joe took the aircraft on to be fixed, brought the aircraft back, and when he brought the aircraft back to reload the passengers back on again, they didn't want to get back on again. They were having such a great time.
I was going to say, how many people wouldn't want to be offloaded at Aitutaki? Then the next thing you chose was 1978. Now, this was the merger, and this was the point that Air New Zealand really turned into a national airline, isn't it?
Well, it is, because it brought the international and domestic airline together. But what it did was actually establish a significant network within New Zealand for New Zealanders, but then collectively together we were able to take the airline to the world and offer a significant network.
Now, for people that haven't been to the 75th anniversary exhibition at Te Papa in Wellington, which is absolutely fantastic, they won't realise that one of the things that it's a very fair exhibition. It looks very fairly at 75 years because an airline also has to mark its disasters, and Air New Zealand has been very upfront about marking its disasters in recent years. Now, one of the things that is very big in that exhibition, there's the black box from Erebus, and Erebus, you've chosen that tragedy on November 28th, 1979, as another key point in the history of that airline.
It was a tough time. Tough for the staff, but the staff were very much there to try and look after the families. But it was also a real disaster for the country as well. But the country got behind us. We did our best for the families, but it was certainly a tragedy, not only for New Zealand aviation, but also for the problems around the DC-10 that had as well. And
you were intimately involved at that time in actually comforting families.
I had families to look after. Yeah, it was pretty tough. And back in those days, we weren't quite as trained as much as what we were today, but we certainly got through it, and we did our best for those families.
People might not remember that you were right at the beginning phases of a major advertising campaign at that time too, with what was his name? Alan Wicker. And that campaign had just started, and I remembered I was doing overnights in Auckland on a radio station, and I think on the Monday of that week, as I was driving in late at night, I saw them putting up huge hoardings with Alan Wicker's face. And then on that night, on the night of the 28th, as I was driving in, I saw them pulling these hoardings down just a few days later. And of course, that was the beginning of us finding out that this enormous tragedy had hit the country.
And the words of those billboards weren't exactly great, considering the tragedy.
Nobody does it better. Yeah. All right, the next one you've chosen is the edge of bankruptcy. And of course, many people might not realise just how close Air New Zealand came to bankruptcy.
Very, very close. And it was the Clark government, after the Ansett demise, that put in $885 million back into the company to keep Air New Zealand going, because it was recognised the importance that Air New Zealand had for the economy of New Zealand, but also particularly inbound tourism.
And I understand that Air New Zealand was within like 20 minutes of being declared bankrupt.
That's what we say, yeah, very definitely. It was very, very close. It was right down to the wire, and some good work by one of our board members, Roger France.
Amazing, isn't it, when you think about that? And when you think how strong the airline is today. So from here, Norm, ahead, another 75 years?
Look, fantastic for New Zealand to be able to have the national carrier. The growth in tourism. Tourism's New Zealand's number 2 export industry. We've got a fantastic country here. We're blessed with such beauty, and it can only go on and get stronger and stronger. We're nearly up to 3 million tourists a year coming to New Zealand now. So what it can be in another 75 years, it's going to be considerable.
Norm, thank you so much for joining us. Pleasure to talk to you again. Norm Thompson, former Air New Zealand Deputy CEO, who was with the company from 18. He was there for 48 of the 75 years. Does that make you feel old, just hearing that, Norm? It makes me feel old just saying it. So happy birthday to you, Air New Zealand. 75 years today, and the future looks bright. We're talking about one of the best airlines in the world, voted one of the best airlines in the world, in many international measures, the best airline in the world. It is one of the most profitable airlines in the world, and it is growing bigger by the day with new routes being announced. I mean, it's impressive, and we can be proud of them, I think.